All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we are going to officially begin taking a look at macromolecules. And again, your note catcher can be found in 1020, number 2. And today, our focus is going to be primarily organic chemistry and the macromolecules. So, the question is, what is organic chemistry? So, this is number 1. Organic chemistry is the study of compounds that contain bonds with carbon atoms. So, when we talk about organic chemistry, when we talk about the chemistry of living things, we're really talking about the chemistry of carbon because all organic chemistry, all organic molecules, all living molecules contain carbon atoms. Part A for number 1. All living things contain the element carbon. So, again, when we talk organic chemistry, when we talk about living chemistry, when we talk about the chemistry of biology, we are talking about the chemistry of carbon.
So that's A.
Carbon, yes, is part A. For part B, we have carbon bonds with the following elements to form large biological molecules. Now, we can call these biological molecules. We can call them macromolecules, which is sort of my preferred term. We can call them biomolecules. But officially, they are all like biomolecules, macromolecules. It's all the same thing. And we know this from our video. We know that carbon can form these bonds with hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Now, we didn't talk too much about sulfur so far, but it's okay. We'll get there. As a side note, I want to remind everybody that every single biomolecule, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and DNA, and nucleic acids, all contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Those are the big 3. Organic chemistry does not happen without carbon, but specifically carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Again, those are the big 3. Now, some of our macromolecules have nitrogen, some of our macromolecules have phosphorus, some of our macromolecules have sulfur. But all of our macromolecules, all of these large biological molecules, have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in them. And there is question. Guys, I can't really do questions when I'm sharing my screen. So if you have a question, if you can unmute yourself and ask, that would be very helpful. Because I can't see the chat when I'm sharing my screen. All right. All right, so this brings us to the idea of carbon. All right, so we are now at number 2. Carbon, there it is. I'm like, I put that wrong. All right, so that top one is the first one. My order must be wrong. Carbon is the element of life. Life does not happen without carbon. All life on Earth is carbon based. What that means is every living thing that we know of here on Earth, every living thing that or I should say, every organic molecule that we've ever found anywhere in our cosmos, on asteroids, someplace, whatever, has always been a carbon based element or molecule. Now, could there be some other form of life out there in the universe somewhere? Yes. Have we found it yet? No. So, as far as we know, and remember, science is the truth as we understand it until better evidence becomes available. So, the evidence that we all have right now is that carbon is the element of life. All life is carbon based. And that is our understanding at this time. Part A. Carbon contains 4 valence electrons. So, what we mean by a valence electron, these are the outermost electrons, right? Remember, so when we talked about bonding, specifically covalent bonding and ionic bonding, and the bonds, we talked about this a few weeks ago. The valence electrons are the electrons involved in bonding. So the fact that they have four is really important. What this means is that it's going to form very, very strong covalent bonds with other elements. So why is it forming covalent bonds? Oh, well, because it likes to share. Again, remember, the idea is with a covalent bond, it's going to be sharing electrons. But with four electrons, it's not going to want to give them away because it's literally about halfway to where it wants to be, right? Because stable is 8. Um, Carbon, again, can form literally millions of different complex structures. Okay? Like literally millions. People spend their whole careers looking at carbon chemistry and don't discover all the molecules that it can form. For letter D, carbon easily bonds with other elements and other carbon atoms. So that is the reason why carbon probably is our element of life, right? It forms bonds very easily, and these bonds are pretty freaking strong. It can form chains. It can form ring structures. I see a ring structure right here at the bottom of the screen. And the cool thing is it can form double, single, and triple bonds. So this is going to be where it bonds to another element and shares. So you can see that double bond down here in this ring structure between the carbons. I have double bonds in this ring structure down here. All right, so that takes us all the way through numbers 1 and number 2. Let's move on to number 3 in the notes. Oh, I'm sorry. I totally forgot I put a video in here. And I need to share my audio. So,
Mike. Hey, it's Professor Dave. Let's talk about carbon. He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave explains. You may have heard that carbon is the element of life. But what does that mean? What determines whether an atom is of carbon in the first place? An atom consists of positively charged protons, neutrons, which have no charge, and negatively charged electrons. An element is defined by the number of protons in the nucleus. 1 proton is hydrogen, 2 is helium, 3 lithium, 4 beryllium, 5 boron, and 6 is carbon. The number of neutrons and electrons can change, but by definition, any atom with 6 protons is a carbon atom. How do they form? Hydrogen, the simplest and most abundant of all elements, accumulates into clumps due to gravity, which become stars. The tremendous inward pressure triggers nuclear fusion, which is when protons and neutrons smash together and fuse. Many elements, including carbon and larger ones like iron, are made in stars. Much larger ones need the immense energy of a supernova explosion or particle accelerators here on Earth. So what's so special about carbon? Let's look at the electrons. Carbon atoms have 6. The first 2 are in the inner shell, and the other 4 are the so-called valence electrons in the outer shell. These are the ones available for bonding with other atoms, which happens when 2 atoms share 2 electrons. Because elements in this part of the periodic table want to have 8 electrons in their outermost shell, carbon has a tendency to make 4 bonds. These can be single, double, or triple bonds, and with many different elements. In addition, while an atom that's bound to 2 or 3 other atoms will adopt a linear or flat shape, a carbon atom that's bound to 4 other atoms will take on a 3-dimensional shape, because that's how the electron clouds on the 4 atoms can be as far away from each other as possible. So it's the ability of carbon to bond in a wide variety of shapes with so many elements, including itself, that makes it so special. Also, carbon-carbon bonds are strong enough to be stable, but not so strong that they can't break and rearrange, which makes them excellent building blocks. When by itself, carbon has many allotropes, or ways an element can be arranged. There's the graphite in your pencil, which consists of slippery sheets of carbon that rub off easily. There's diamond, the hardest substance known, and we can even make interesting structures like nanotubes and fullerenes. That's just carbon by itself. When combined with hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few other elements, it makes all the diverse structures in your body, including carbohydrates, proteins, and DNA. We can take nature a step further and synthesize novel materials with an array of purposes. Putting carbons in the empty spots of an iron lattice makes it stronger. We call this steel, which is used in most of the large structures we know today. Teflon, a carbon-fluorine polymer, is a non-stick substance that's highly resistant to chemical degradation. And carbon-based synthetic drugs like inhibitors that can silence a faulty enzyme hold the prospect of curing so many diseases. That's a lot of reasons to love carbon. It really is the element of life. See you next time.
All right. Woo, carbon, the element of life. Gotta love it. All right, back to the notes. All right, so we are now at number 3. Okay. Macromolecules are large organic compounds, and they are formed from hundreds or even thousands of smaller molecules called monomers. So we are part on 3A. Monomers are a single molecules of a carbon compound. Okay, a monomer is like a building block. A monomer is like if you think of like a necklace that had maybe like like pearls. A monomer would be like a single pearl in a pearl necklace. Um, Part B, the process of joining monomers to create larger molecules is called polymerization. Um, because when we put monomers together, they form really long chains called polymers. Okay, so a monomer is a building block. When I put a bunch of monomers together, we call that process polymerization. And then through polymerization, we make, big surprise, polymers. All right, so this has now taken us through A, B, and C of number 3. Where are we on time? I know we got a late start today because the Zoom thing. All right, for number 4, monomers and polymers. So how is it like a beaded necklace? We just kind of talked about this. So the individual beads represent the monomers. The complete necklace represents a polymer. So how many different types of monomers make up this necklace? How many different monomers in this example are y'all seeing? Anybody? Yeah. So I have 6 different monomers. I could easily have every single one of these be like a little heart. They're all the same. So some polymers are made up of slightly different monomers. Other polymers are made up of giant long chains of like the same monomer over and over and over again. So sometimes you get, some diversity in your polymers. Sometimes it's all like the same. It doesn't matter. Either way, a monomer is a single building block of a polymer. And all of our macromolecules are collections of polymers. All right, so we are now at number 4. Okay, monomers can join together to create polymers, and polymers can be broken apart into monomers. Okay, so dehydration synthesis. This is when monomers are joined together. The process of dehydration synthesis is the process by which monomers are joined together through covalent bonds and make polymers. When this happens, we lose water. Water is lost. This chemical process, that one of the results is a water molecule literally is kind of, like broken off and lost. So that's why we call it dehydration. We are losing water. So that kind of makes sense, right? Synthesis, putting things together, dehydration, the loss of water. We are putting the monomers together through the loss of water. So that's why we call it dehydration synthesis. Hydrolysis, on the other hand, are when we break down polymers into the monomers. Okay, and this is the same exact reaction, but in reverse. So this time we are going to use water molecules to break down the bonds between the molecules. So again, dehydration synthesis, losing water to put stuff together. The monomers are joined together through the process of losing the water molecule. Hydrolysis, um, When we have hydrolysis, this is when the polymers themselves are broken back down into the component parts. Both processes, whether we're talking dehydration synthesis or whether we're talking hydrolysis, requires an enzyme to speed up the rate of reaction. And we will talk more about enzymes later on this week, probably actually next week, but that's okay. All right, so a little video making and breaking of the macromolecules.
Many important biological molecules are made of repeating subunits called monomers. When many monomers join, the result is a polymer. For example, amino acid monomers join to form a protein polymer. Those monomers combine to form a complex carbohydrate polymer. Biological polymers form by dehydration synthesis reactions. As you can see here, each of the monomers in this reaction has a hydrogen, or H, and a hydroxyl, or OH group. In the course of the reaction, the hydrogen is removed from one monomer and the hydroxyl group from the other. The hydrogen and hydroxyl group combine to form water, and a bond links the two monomers. Hydrolysis is the opposite of a dehydration synthesis reaction. During a hydrolysis reaction, a polymer is reduced to its monomer subunits by the addition of water. In fact, the word hydrolysis literally means to break water. The hydroxyl group from a water molecule attaches to one monomer, and the remaining hydrogen attaches to the other monomer. In other words, water is used to break the bond holding monomers together. Let's do a quick recap. During dehydration synthesis, monomers join to form polymers, and water is released. The opposite happens during hydrolysis, where water is added to the reaction to break a polymer into monomers.
All right, so hopefully that helped sort of clear things up a little bit, gave you a little visual on it. The four types of macromolecules, right now we are at letter D. Macromolecules are living things based on the living things are grouped based on their chemical compositions. Each type of macromolecule serves a purpose that is vital to life. Remember, this is a biology class, so what we are trying to study and what we're trying to understand is how does all of these things support life? So, which means that we're going to keep going back to our 8 characteristics of life that we learned earlier in this year. But in order to support those 8 characteristics of life, we have 4 main, not to say there's not other ones, but these are the 4 main macromolecules of life. This is the 4 bullet points in letter D. So we have carbohydrates, we have lipids, we have proteins, and we have nucleic acids. Now, you get these macromolecules from the food you eat. So the carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acid, all of this comes from the food that you eat. Literally, you are what you eat. The DNA in your body, all those nucleic acids that carry your genetic traits, you picked up those molecules when you eat things because again the food that you eat is organic in the sense that it is used to be a living thing, so either it's a plant or an animal or it came from a plant or an animal, and those things are made of cells, and cells have nuclei and nuclei have DNA. So your body breaks down plant DNA, for example, when you eat, I don't know, some lettuce, and it uses those same little tiny building blocks to build your DNA through dehydration synthesis, and then again through the breakdown process of hydrolysis to break it down, and then of course the recombination to make your DNA through dehydration synthesis. So again, it's one of those things like where you literally are what you eat, which when I found this out when I was learning biology, I was like, holy crap, I need to eat better. So maybe some of you guys do too. All right. Again, quick little intro to the 4 macromolecules.
Thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to talk about macromolecules. Macromolecules are large structures that make up all living organisms. All macromolecules have small subunits called monomers, which bind together to form larger units called polymers. There's 4 classes of macromolecules: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and amino acids. And I'll talk about each of these in turn, starting with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the main fuel source for most living things, as well as a structural component for many plants. Monomers for carbohydrates are called monosaccharides. Saccharide means sugar, so monosaccharides, one sugar. These are simple sugars like glucose, fructose, and lactose. Then your polymers are polysaccharides, and they are long chains of monomers or monosaccharides. Storage carbohydrates like starch in plants and glycogen in animals for energy storage, and then structural like cellulose in plants and chitin in insects. Moving on to lipids, lipids have a variety of functions in living organisms, and there's a lot of things lumped into the category of lipids because they're all hydrophobic. Right? Some functions include energy storage, cell membrane formation, and steroid formation. They have no real monomers. They're just kind of, they just are what they are. So fats include triglycerides and saturated and unsaturated fats. You also have phospholipids, which form cellular membranes, and then steroids, which include all sex hormones, and all the steroids form from a cholesterol base. And all those are included in lipids, so it's pretty diverse. Then you have proteins. Proteins are involved in nearly all cellular functions and are a major part of all living organisms. Their monomers are called amino acids, and there are 20 different amino acids. And their polymers are called polypeptides. You bind amino acids together to get polypeptides. And the protein structure results from folding, which determines the function. And lastly, you have nucleic acids. Nucleic acids store, transmit, and express genetic information. So the monomers are called nucleotides, like adenine, guanine, and thymine. You may be familiar with these terms from studying DNA and RNA, and that's what their polymers are. They're called polynucleotides, and they're strands of DNA and RNA. And you can watch this video about DNA and RNA for more information on that. And hopefully, maybe I can take some time in the future and make individual videos for each of these macromolecules because there's a lot more information I could include. So if I get around to that, I'll link those here. If not, sorry. But I hope you.
All right, cool. So that was a quick introduction to the macromolecules, and I think a lot of that we kind of already knew because we've been introducing the macromolecules for the last few days, which is fine. But again, I sort of gave us a little more of an overview, gave us some of the functions. I want to